Hello, welcome to today's episode of Craft the Draft's Coates Talent League Club by Club preview. And today we're looking at the four Northern Academies in Brisbane, Gold Coast, GWS and Sydney. And to go through it with me is Craft the Draft analyst Jonty Ralphsmith. Jonty, how are you, mate?
Yeah, really good. Good to be here and looking forward to going through this analysis. It's been great to see the growth of the Northern Academies in the last few years in particular. I think Gold Coast have been one that have done it well.
Yeah, well, I think when we talk about academies, depending on obviously where you're from, it can be quite a polarizing topic when we discussed NGAs as well as Northern Academies, and obviously with the changes the AFL has had to draft rights over the past 12 months, and now seeing top 20, top 40 selections having no real limited access. We have seen a lift in the points index to make it harder for clubs, but certainly not impossible for them to get hands on the talent that they've been nurturing for multiple years, and it has been a great success for a club like Gold Coast, who are yet to reach finals but are still trying to build that list that can get them to September. And I guess what some people might find is a bit of a negative for the equal draft access that a lot of fans want. At the same time, building football in the non-football states is probably outweighs the negatives, you'd think.
Yeah, I think so. So for each of the last 3 years, Queensland set record participation numbers, and these are sort of things that I think don't get highlighted quite enough. Is that by Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sydney, and GWS doing what they do, we see what they achieve at the elite level and the one or two players that might get drafted every year to those clubs. But the grassroots impact is profound. And I think if there wasn't that incentive of those players or of those clubs getting significant discounts, then there's a chance that the resourcing, both financial and social, wouldn't necessarily be as strong as what it currently is. And we know that the AFL is looking to nationalise the game as much as possible. So I think that's a big positive that often gets overlooked. And then there's also other things that the northern states are inherently disadvantaged with obviously fixturing. They have to travel a lot more than the Victorian clubs, and they've struggled in other different ways as well in terms of attracting players. We know Sydney have had the cost of living things in recent years that has limited them. So I think it's just one of those things that we sort of accept as part of the whole, advantage, disadvantage. Some clubs get advantage in different ways, but yeah, I think it's fine how it is, and certainly it's good to see those clubs hopefully getting strengthened in these ways, and they're also able to strengthen at a grassroots level.
You mentioned the recent success of some of the academies. So obviously, Gold Coast is probably the one to name, and that follows very good draft periods from maybe close to a decade ago from GWS in Brisbane and Sydney as well. When you talk about Isaac Heaney, Cal Mills, Tom Green, Harris Andrews, Eric Hitwood. So when we now look at Gold Coast, who I think now close to a third of their list are from Queensland, and that's kind of the list balance that they probably even want to have stronger numbers with, but a
Yeah.
strong Queensland contingent on their list is a big tick for the AFL. Last year, headlined by Leo Lombard as a top 10 selection, the year before having 4 first-round selections. When we look at this year's crop, it sounds like we could have quite a similar intake to what we had in 2023 when they had Jed Walter, Ethan Reid, Jake Rogers, and Will Graham all head to the club's AFL list.
Yeah, I think so. And we'll talk about some of those players, but it could even be more. They've got so many players that are on the radar. They'll play for the Allies throughout the season. I think the big three that really stand out are Zeke Hewland, who could go in the top 5, Bo Adensall, who's got some senior experience, and Dylan Patterson as well. Probably flies under the radar of those two, but I think he's every bit as good as certainly Bo Adensall. So yeah, I'll profile them, but they're the three that stand out. And then there's a litany of others below them: Kalani White, Max Hudson, Kobe Colson, Cooper Collins, and the list goes on. So yeah, exciting times for Gold Coast fans, and yeah, they've got a lot of emerging talent coming through.
And speaking of Suns fans, they would have been excited with what they saw, I guess, last year alone, not only for the academy in their short period in the talent league, and not only maybe if they had Allies experience, but the VFL, as you mentioned, Adensall had VFL experience, as did, I think, Patterson. Zeke Hewland had a pretty starring performance in his, I think, first game. I think Jai Murray was another as well to get a run in the VFL level. And as we saw with Leo Lombard a couple of years ago in their premiership run in the VFL, that senior experience as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old has certainly boded well for them in getting these teenagers prepared for the top flight.
Yeah, it certainly has, and it's a massive advantage, I guess you could say, that these players have getting the VFL experience. Obviously, we know that a lot of the top 15 to 20 selections in the draft following the national championships do get that opportunity down in Victoria as well at their sort of aligned VFL club with their Coates League club. But yeah, certainly Leo Lombard being able to assimilate in with the VFL stuff was really handy, and a lot of these players have impressed over pre-season training with the Gold Coast as well. So that's another good benefit that these kids are getting. And yeah, I'm sure it'll show in the early part of the Coates Talent League when the Gold Coast Academy is involved and into the national champs as well.
Let's jump into profiling some of the players that we have named. Zeke Euland's probably top of the tree, brother
Yep.
of former Gold Coast Academy member Bodie.
Yep.
Just a player who's certainly exciting in a role that isn't often a position that I guess catches all the headlines. And when you're more of a flank player who can play halfback, maybe on the wing, can still roll through the midfield, but he isn't that big bullish midfielder that we've come to see really dominate the last couple of years. What's your take on Zeke and where his game's at heading into his draft campaign?
Yeah, I think his game's in a really positive position. Yeah, obviously we saw what he was able to do as a bottom major in the national championships, and that's given him an outstanding platform for 2025. He's really explosive. He's a left footer as well. That always adds a point of difference. And from all reports in the Allies camp over the summer, he did spend a little bit of time in the midfield. So I think we'll get to see that contested side of his game. And he's got that acceleration to get out of contest, which is really, really impressive. But yeah, like you said, he probably settles at AFL level if indeed he reaches the heights that we expect as a high half forward, maybe a six sort of player that impacts stoppages, which can be a bit of a specialised position. And you're right, it's not necessarily one that necessarily attracts the headlines of your midfielders or your key position players. But yeah, he certainly seems to have experted that position.
Two more, maybe on the next rung that we'll discuss: Dylan Patterson and Bo Adams. So let's start with Patterson first, because I think he's a player that I know you are a big fan of, and me too. Just given what I liked from him to finish off his bottom age campaign last year in the Future Stars game, we've seen him be that strong, speedy midfielder and have quite an attacking impact. But playing defense and having got some really good moments on the defensive side of his game, stopping chances on the line against his opposition, and offering some great run and pace with the ball in hand. What did you kind of make of Dylan's bottom age campaign, and where do you kind of see him reaching in this year?
Yeah, massive fan of Dylan Patterson, and I'm glad you mentioned that sort of defensive running, two-way running side of his game, because you do look at him and you see that speed, you see that dynamism and that sort of forward half presence that he could become. But like you said, we saw on AFL Grand Final day on the MCG, in a stage where often players can get overawed, that he was one who was willing to do the two-way running, and he also did it in the under-17s trial that was played a month earlier at Avalon Airport at Werribee. He was one of the best players on the ground that day. So yeah, as a midfielder, he's got a lot of traits, but he's willing to apply the pressure as well. I think he's one heading into 2025 that's sort of, probably second half of the first round if we were casting a long way ahead. Obviously, there's a lot of footy still to be played, but he's had a very good pre-season and he's a hard-working sort of bull at a gate when it comes to attitude and getting everything out of himself. So yeah, I'm really excited with where he can take his footy. He's got a good athletic profile, and like you said, his skills are very, very strong.
And Adamsall as well, one that didn't seem to have too much of an issue at any level he played. He was, I think, one of their best performers from a VFL standpoint among their academy tryouts at the level, but at the same time, talent league football or even at the local football in Queensland seemed pretty rock solid.
Yeah, hard-nosed midfielder. I think he's one that's not going to take too long to really adapt to that next level of footy. And I think we've seen it where every time he has gone to the next level, like you said, he's been able to adapt really, really quickly. And I don't think the senior bodies will concern him too much. But yeah, his ability to win clearances, understand his way around a stoppage and win the footy, but then also be willing to apply tackles or certainly apply pressure is really important. And I think a good component to the Gold Coast midfield when we do see them play as an academy for the few games in the Coates Talent League. We talk about Dill Patterson. He's got two-way running, but he's probably more of that balanced inside-outside midfielder, and Zeke Euland as well, more off the flanks, where Bo Adamsall is more that real contested sort of player. So yeah, I think he'll play an important part for the teams that he plays for this year.
And we'll just reel off a couple of names here that I'm happy for you to pick and choose on who you want to really highlight. But Cooper Collins, Kobe Coulson, Jai Murray, Kalani White, Max Hudson. Obviously, Kalani's going to be tied to Melbourne. He'll have a bit of a decision to make. But among that group, they get plenty of versatility and in the kind of options that if they are looking at list needs at some part of the draft, that they could have access to someone to fill a hole in Damien Hardwick's squad.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you talked about, so you've got Jai Murray and Max Hudson, who are both sort of defenders, but they're different types of defenders. Jai Murray probably more associate his ball use and his composure off the half back line, where Max Hudson's able to really lock down, and he's really hard to beat in a one-on-one. Kalani White, the other thing that I'm looking forward to seeing, obviously, like you said, he's got that decision to make, but it'll be interesting to see whether he plays up forward or down back predominantly this year. I think he's probably more so a defender, so that's what we'll see of him. He's raw, so hopefully we see some good glimpses of him. And then, yeah, like you said, Kobe Colson and Cooper Collins, a couple of others. Cooper Collins, a good front half player. I think he impressed when he was with Gold Coast in the preseason. That's Gold Coast's senior AFL squad. And then Kobe Colson as well in that under-17s trial I referenced earlier about Dylan Patterson. He was another one that really impressed and has the ability to make things happen with ball in hand and can play a little bit anyway.
Let's look into some of the other academies from the Northern Crop and the prospects that might lead their 2025 draft campaigns and potential list strategies. We'll just move across to Brisbane to start. And Dan Annable, member of the AFL Academy and a player who had such a strong season for whether it's the Lions Academy and stints with the Allies and even capping it off in that Future Stars game as well. Where do you kind of see his game as that reliable midfielder who could just be another incoming line that adds to a pretty stacked midfield group already?
Yeah, we did an introducing segment on him, so check that out on Zero Hangers YouTube page if you haven't already. But yeah, he's one who, like you said, he'll be really reliable, and he's clearly Brisbane's most prominent academy prospect for 2025. He's one who, yeah, like you said, he's got that contested ball winning and the ability to apply pressure and that sort of thing. But it's probably his outside game that can be a little bit deceptive, because you look at him and you think he's sort of a strong bullet gate midfielder, but he's got that ability on the outside to use the ball really well. Got some penetration in his kick as well. So I think he's got all the attributes that you want starting off the season, and he's a very, very good character and a bit of a leader as well. For him, it'll just be probably a matter of rounding off his game and becoming a little bit more rounded on the outside, if anything. But yeah, I think a really good package that could in future years complement the likes of Jasper Fletcher, Levi Ashcroft, and Sam Marshall for the Lions.
And outside of Dan, who are the other Brisbane Tide prospects that you're kind of keen to see and their draft campaigns unfold this year?
Yeah, Dan's, like we said, he's clearly the top of the tree. But Raf Gisu is one who played on AFL Grand Final day. He's one who's an electric small forward and has the ability to kick goals in a lot of different ways. Harrison Bridge made the under-16s All-Australian team and has sort of been there or thereabouts in conversations for a couple of years in the talent pathway and has had a really strong pre-season. And Isaac Waller will be part of a conga line of tools in this year's draft crop. There's sort of 8 or 9 of them that are around that 200 centimetre plus mark. He's well over 200 centimetres and he's still raw and developing, but I think there's a lot of excitement about what he could become. So they're probably the main others that we'll look at to start the season. But yeah, there could be some more beyond that could pop.
It's great to see GWS last year having a couple of their academy kids, Logan Smith and Josiah Delana, making their way to GWS Academy. I think Cooper Bell as well going to the Suns. So great to see that the Giants are finding some success, particularly with Delana's case out in Western Sydney as well. What are the names that the Giants fans should be looking forward to in 2025?
I think the main one for Giants fans is Bailey Dean Latanis. He was another one that played in that under-17s futures game on AFL Grand Final day, and he's a medium forward. He's able to take a mark, probably plays a little bit taller than he is, but he's also quite good when the ball hits the ground as well. He's quite dynamic and can kick goals. He kicked a couple of goals on AFL Grand Final day in that game and looked quite dangerous when the ball was in his vicinity, so he'll be one that will be looking to build on his 2024 campaign, and there should be a lot of confidence about what he could become, because I think he'll be a key asset for the Allies this year.
Over at Moore Park, now when we talk about Sydney's Academy, they've had some great success in top 5, top 10, multiple top 15 and 20 draft picks coming straight out of their academy. And again, it could look like they could have 2-3 players picked in that first round draft range come November this year. So we talk about Lockie Carmichael, Noah Chamberlain and Max King, 3 players who've had really strong, not only bottom age, but even from under 16s levels from the national standpoint. Where do you want to just give us a bit of a rundown on those 3 and where you see them taking their games this year?
Yeah, so Noah Chamberlain, he's a really good forward, probably a bit of a third forward at this stage. He might grow a little bit more, but he's one who'll give Sydney's academy a lot of presence forward of the footy, and then he's got the ability to, I guess, grow into a real power forward if he is taken at the next level. Lockie Carmichael's that interceptor type. He reads the ball really, really well and protects the drop zone quite well as well. So yeah, his marking and his ability overhead is quite strong, but then his kicking is something that's probably an underrated element of his game. And then Max King, I think if you speak to people in the industry, there was a clear consensus following the release of the 2025 Academy list that he was the unluckiest player not to be on it. And he was interrupted a little bit throughout last season with injury, and that was probably a main reason why. And we know that the AFL do like to spread the players who are picked in that across Australia. And with two other Sydney Academy players already selected, he was probably the one that just missed out. But he's an explosive midfielder. His athletic profile is absolutely insane, and he's a big body as well. So he's sort of got everything you want for that prototype midfielder that's talked about so often in the modern game. And he's got the ability to then go forward, impact the scoreboard as well. But yeah, his clearance winning and ball winning is probably his one wood in the midfield. So I think he's one that will be looking to prove a few people wrong. And if there's injuries, he might even break into the AFL Academies side early in the year, given we did see Toby Travalia was one that did it last year, coming from outside the AFL Academy to play in it. I think he's probably the one that's best positioned to do it in 2025 if someone does go down.
Obviously, a lot of the players that we've named will actually get to combine, most of them playing for the Allies this year. And obviously what we got to see from the Allies in 2023, maybe a bit of a fall away just given the talent in their top age range last year, but still Leo Lombard and Sam Marshall, kids straight out of these academies, really leading the way for the Allies. How do you see the Allies stacking up this year when you add in, some of the, I guess, Victorian border, New South Wales border prospects, and then we have Tasmania and Northern Territory as well?
Yeah, I think the Allies will be clear favourites to win the national championship this year, and as clear a favourite as we've seen in a fair while with the list they're going to be able to put together. We've sort of put all of those names forward as players who are certainly on the draft radar, and a lot of them are in first round contention. So you're going to combine all of those. So it's going to be a really deep midfield when you consider Max King, Dan Annable, Bo Adensul, Dill Patterson and Zeke Euland will all run through there. So will Ryder Corrigan, who's from Murray, like you said, one of those sort of border kids. He's from just north of the border, plays for the Murray Bushrangers, another really good inside midfielder. They've got a lot of run off half back, but the key area of the ground that I think they're stronger than all the other states is just their depth of tools. So we talked about Kalani White, so he'll probably play down back. And then they've also got a few others from other parts of the country as well. So Taj Murray's from the Northern Territory. I think he'll be one who will start in the ruck, and he'll sort of rotate with Isaac Waller as well from the Brisbane Academy. And then they've got Jasper Hay from Tasmania, who'll probably play in defence, might play up forward as well. And then Liam Heatherton and Lenny Collar. So a couple of key position players from the Murray Bushrangers. Lenny Collar, a key defender, probably as good a one-on-one as there is almost in the Talent League. And Liam Heatherton's one who really put his name on the map late last year. So you combine all of those tools and their sort of list blend, they're going to be pretty hard to beat in 2025, I would have thought.
You talk about the depth and the options that they could have in the first round of this draft. Something we haven't seen yet from a Northern Academy talent is going first overall. Obviously, there's a lot for the club holding pick one to consider if they want to draft their own talent or force a bid and make a rival, really have to pay up, at the top of the tree. So we saw Jamari Ugahagan, who was next generation academy for the Western Bulldogs, and he received a bid by Adelaide in 2020. But what we haven't seen is one of these Northern Academy, profiles really putting their stamping their authority on the draft and going number one and earning a bid that would, with the new points index, really cost a club and potentially hamper their chances of getting further talent. But do you think that there's a real possibility we could see that come November?
Yeah, I think if there was a year that it was going to happen, it was probably going to be last year, wasn't it? With Levi Ashcroft, the clear sort of consensual best player in the draft, but then he fell a little bit, and we know that there's some reasons why. Obviously, players get the glitz and glamour and the money that can come with being a number one pick in terms of ambassadorship and that sort of thing. But I think it's something the clubs will consider again this year if Zeke Euland or potentially Max King as well put their name on the map as much as some people expect they will, particularly Zeke Euland, just given the depth of Gold Coast's academy. It wouldn't necessarily just it would hamper Gold Coast down the line. Like you said, yes, they'd have to pay up for Zeke Euland and they'd be expected to do so, but then it might hamper their ability to get a Dill Patterson or a Bo Adensall. And if they did match bids for all those three, it might put them in deficit. It might make them struggle in future years, or it might make them struggle to get someone like a Max Hudson or a Kobe Coulson if they so choose. So yeah, I think the long-term prospect of putting a bid on at number one, given the depth of Gold Coast's academy talent this year, is something that could be considered, just to make things a little bit more difficult on the second night of the draft or the following year for Gold Coast.
So obviously we'll have the Allies lining up midway through the year, and I think the first talent league action for some of these academies doesn't get underway until April, so just over a month away, which is quite exciting. That'll wrap up our coverage of the 4 Northern Academies. We'll have every Coates Talent League side previewed ahead of the season start. Jonty, thank you for joining us again.
No worries. Thanks, Mitch.